Let's go live to Birmingham and speak to our political reporter Katherine Forster, who's there. Katherine, I'm trying to work out, is it a U-turn on a U-turn or a full 360 degrees turn?
Oh, my goodness. It's hard to keep track, isn't it? Liz Truss came in. She wanted to be the new Margaret Thatcher. She wanted to be clear. She'd take a definite line. She was not going to be foreturning. She was holding firm to the 45p tax rate cut just the day before yesterday. Then, of course, that went in the bin. Then Kwasi Kwarteng said that he would be making a medium-term fiscal statement, and he said in the speech, along with an OBR forecast. The word he used was shortly. That was reported as going to be within the month. Now this news that's just coming out, it's really very unclear, and I would say the atmosphere here is febrile and there is a lot of gloom around. Now, there are certainly some people, and some in the media, Daily Mail specifically, very unhappy that Liz Truss backed down because they think that shows weakness. But there are many other MPs who feel that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng have made unforced errors. They came in all gung-ho. They didn't consult properly. They didn't take account of views in the Parliamentary Party or the Bank of England or the OBR, and now they are paying the price. There are many MPs here. Speaking off the record, I was talking to a Red Wall MP last night. I said, do you think it's recoverable? And he said, no, absolutely not. It's over. He used... I can't tell you the words that were used, but it's not good. That is a view shared by quite a number of MPs that feel that they cannot come back from this, and that really they're doing Labour's work for them, and the next election is probably already lost.
Yeah, just looking at what Priti Patel said, the party will live or die by economic credibility. Now, on that very point, I think it's probably safe to say we were expecting that autumn tax statement to be brought forward. It had been slated for November the 23rd. We are awaiting Liam's full interview with the Chancellor. Stay with us on GBNews Day to get that in full. But the indications are now, from what he's saying to Liam, that will still be in November rather than being brought forward as some thought to the end of this month.
Yes, I mean, he did say, very unclear, hopefully we'll get clarification from Liam shortly, but he did say, I was very struck, I was in the hall yesterday when he made the speech. The word he used was shortly. Shortly to me is a couple of weeks, a month tops. Shortly is not sometime towards the end of next month. So it's very interesting. But as you say, Priti Patel is going to be speaking later. I will be at that and I'll covering that back for you. And of course, there are lots of big beasts roaming around who really are stirring up trouble for the new regime. She's expected to say they've lost their reputation for fiscal discipline, as you say, Mark. And then, we've got Michael Gove has been going to so many fringe events. He's going to another one, I think, at 1 o'clock. I might try to get down to that. And, the rebels have got the wind in their sails now because they do sense weakness. Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng have been forced to back down twice, if you count the reversal on where we don't know what's happening now with the OBR forecast and the fiscal statement, but certainly a change. And then this row about benefits. The Prime Minister has been asked repeatedly if she will guarantee that benefits will rise by inflation, as Rishi Sunak had promised. She has repeatedly failed to answer that question directly. Now, I spoke to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions yesterday, Chloe Smith. Again, I asked her directly too. She did not answer clearly. And splits emerging now, even within the Cabinet, with Penny Mordaunt saying, leader of the House of Commons, of course, saying that she thought it was the right thing to do to raise them in line with inflation. So there really does seem to be a breakdown in discipline with the messaging within the party, and even as high up as the Cabinet, which is not what you would want at the beginning of your premiership. It's literally just 4 weeks today, in fact, that the late Queen asked Liz Truss to form a government in Balmoral. And my goodness, it can't have gone as Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng have hoped. They will hope that they can rebuild from this, and who knows, the polls are really dreadful. A couple of new polls out today putting them 25, 28 points behind Labour, but really a terrible position to be in, and a lot of very, very unhappy Conservative MPs here.
This is the situation, of course, within the conference centre there in Birmingham, and clearly there'll be problems for the government when they get back to Parliament. But the other issue, of course, to reflect on why this is all so important is what the markets had done previously in reaction. And Mel Stride, who's the chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and we ought to add the rider, a supporter of Rishi Sunak, of course, indicating that it was vital for the Chancellor to spell out in detail what was going to be happening and when, because the markets may take fright once again.
Yes, absolutely. He was on broadcast this morning. He was saying he was very glad that the statement was being brought forward, that the OBR assessment was brought forward. Obviously, Kwasi Kwarteng yesterday was very keen to reference the Bank of England, very keen to reference the OBR, very keen to bring them in and say, I am going to be fiscally responsible. But many are wondering if the damage is not already done. Now, important to say, the pound is now back up, and it's higher, in fact, than it was before the fiscal statement. Interest rates are reportedly not expected to go as high as they were, and even the £65 billion bailout for the pensions funds that was being discussed last week. At the moment, the government has only spent around £3 billion on that. Not to say that that is not a vast amount of money. And obviously, Kwasi Kwarteng's comment yesterday that his fiscal event had been greeted with a little turbulence. There was a lot of laughter in the hall for that, but I think elsewhere, this has not been handled well. There have been big consequences for the country, so they will really need to sharpen up going forward. So, yeah, difficult, very difficult times.
Just to tell viewers and listeners that we are waiting for this full interview to come through from the Chancellor fairly shortly. It's just been finished by Liam there in Birmingham to actually tell us what's likely to happen. But just to talk more crazy numbers, the shortfall, if you like, is what, some £43 billion now in terms of financing the tax cuts, which we think will have to be done by borrowing, or, as you've been discussing with these cuts maybe in spending, trying to balance the books elsewhere. The indication is that she is really, Liz Truss, fighting against the tide on this idea of not linking it to inflation, bearing in mind inflation now running at 10%, which would be perhaps an additional bill on top of everything else.
Yes, absolutely. Now, people around Liz Truss are saying, well, how would it be fair when working people are only getting maybe a 5 or a 6% pay rise, that people on benefits, maybe who are not working, would be getting 10%? Is that fair? Well, of course, the problem with that argument is that 40% of universal credit claimants are, in fact, working. It is by no means the case that everybody on benefits is sitting at home. A lot of these people are working, and they are the people who are going to be most acutely affected by inflation at 10%. It's not a question from them of not being able to have a foreign holiday or cancelling their Netflix subscription or not being able to pay their school fees for private school. It's a question of being able to put the heating on, being able to buy food, being able to buy new shoes for their children. And again, the worry is, Conservative MPs, that this is politically toxic, but it plays into, again, we saw the government have rowed back now on the tax cuts for the people at the very top, but the perception that this government is really going to look after the people at the top and is less concerned with helping at the bottom. And politically, that's a very, very difficult message to sell on the doorstep, and one that a lot of Conservative MPs already think that they have the numbers to block this in Parliament, but apparently Liz Truss is saying, bring it on. So we will see.
Indeed. Katherine, stay with us, of course, and we'll be bringing that interview once it's completed with the Chancellor, and that breaking news that he indicates that perhaps he won't be making that tax statement in November. But let's actually get some reaction now with